Hey guys, I'm John. Welcome back to my channel. I'm here again with my big blue mug of coffee. If you watched the last episode, I'm literally just recording like 30 seconds right after the last one. But this is episode four, where I'm reading The Value of Freedom. This is a document published by the Alberta Prosperity Project, which outlines an economic argument for, what an independent Alberta would be. And it's aimed to like assuage fears and to just give us confidence that, hey, not only are we going to get freedom from being independent, not only are we going to get a government that aligns with our values and that protects our culture and and meets our needs, but we're also going to be confident in this because, like, economically, we're going to be better off. And that's what this whole document's laying out here. Like, here's all the sources. They use StatsCan, Fraser Institute, Library of Parliament, like the CRA. This first video, the second video I made, went through all of these numbers here, where basically we're paying more into Canada than we're getting back, to the tune of about $40 to $50 billion per year. And so that leaves us a lot of wiggle room just in case these numbers are off. And it says in the first executive summary that, give us a 10 plus or minus 10% margin of error on these estimates. And then it talks about the taxes that we can cut, and that talks about the services that we need to replace. And I mean, honestly, we're going to need to replace the services, but I went through all of that in the second video. You should watch all of these in the same order, in the correct order, by the way. There's a playlist that I'll leave a link to. And then the last video went through the CPP, the pension plan, and basically it's an argument that, hey, we'd be better off if we had our own pension plan. And hands down, that makes sense. But we could do this right now. We actually don't need independence for this. So win or lose the referendum, we should have an Alberta pension plan. And then the negotiations, like how much are we going to get out of that and all this. So the next one here is RCMP funding and policing. And so I'll start reading here. This section examines the RCMP cost sharing structure. Alberta's payments and implications for an independent Alberta. There are non-financial benefits in greater Albertan control over policing, including the ability to focus on crime, drug abuse, fentanyl, and ensuring our borders are properly controlled. So I like that. Non-financial benefits. A federal police force is pulled in many directions with they got a limited amount of funding and resources that they can use, and then so they're pulled here and pulled there and pulled here and pulled there. But an Alberta police force can focus on issues that are happening in Alberta. So that's if there's one reason you need, honestly, that should be the reason right there. Policy-wise, increased focus on crime reduction and ensuring that the system is aimed at protecting Albertans, not criminals, are broadly sought by Albertans. Like, okay. I don't think very many people would accuse the police of not doing their job. They round up all these criminals and they risk their lives to do that. And then they just get let out. So policy-wise, like, this isn't just policing, right? This is our court system. This is how we think about crime conceptually. Are we trying to punish people for committing crimes, or are we trying to rehabilitate people? And I think right now Canada is kind of stuck in the middle. I think on a gut level, many people, if you ask them, they're like, we want to punish people. Like, you did something bad, we want to punish you for doing that. Just like satisfying to see it, right? But I don't know if that's really the way to, if your goal is to have a society that's like fair and just and where people get along, then rehabilitation is kind of the other angle. And Canada's kind of stuck in the middle. Like, we put people in jail and we're punishing them, but then we're not really rehabilitating them, but then we kind of are trying a little bit, and we kind of do a bad job at both ends. It's like, pick a side. Anyway, this is talking about policing, so sorry for running down the rabbit hole. There would need to be an intention that those RCMP who moved into Alberta Police Force would be given protection for their seniorities and pensions. That is not costed in this document. Oh. So, well, if you're a police officer and you are thinking about, hey, you're RCMP and you're thinking about joining the Alberta Police Force, we want to keep your seniority and your pensions, but that's not costed. So this is a place that we need to do some more work on, because I don't think anybody in this movement would say, no, we're going to take RCMP officers and like start you off at the bottom again. Nobody wants that. But I'm glad they're admitting that this isn't factored in. I wonder why. Maybe it's too complicated to figure out. In part, as it would be topic of negotiation with Canada, resolvable either by transfer of funds to Alberta or payment directly to pensioners from Canada. In any event, such funds payable by Alberta would be immaterial in the context of the projected fiscal capacity surplus. You know, I think it was my first video, I said something like, if you've ever received a large chunk of money, maybe somebody passed away and, gave it to you or something, then there's a temptation to just throw money at things, right? Like, money solves all the problems. And I'm just going to criticize my own movement here and say that, yes, we're probably going to have a lot more money. Like, right away, not paying Ottawa, hands down, like that argument just sounds really clear to me. But it seems like every one of these little problems that comes up, the answer is we have more fiscal capacity. We have a surplus of fiscal capacity. And so it's true, but we just got to be really careful about this. And this is why, I'm really confident. If Dennis Kalma, if you ever watch this, I'm really confident after meeting you and after seeing how you've laid all this out here, I'm confident that there's a lot of smart people, yourself included, who are leading this movement, and we can figure this out. But at the same time, the risks are real, and we can't just have this mentality that we got money forever. We do have to be really, careful here. Okay, RCMP cost structure sharing in Alberta. Contract policing agreements. Alberta contracts the RCMP under the Provincial Police Service Agreement, PPSA, and Municipal Police Service Agreements, MPSA. Okay, yes. So provincial policing, Alberta pays 70%. Federal government pays 30%. Municipal, approximately 15,000 municipalities pay 90%, and the federal government pays 10%. That's interesting. I thought it was higher, right? I thought that, so the municipalities, every town, every city, every county, it's funded by the essentially property taxes is what's paying for this. Huh. And so the federal government just gives a pittance, 10%. What that tells me right there is that, you know what, even if we change this rapidly, a 10% cut in policing is huge, okay? But it's not the end of the world. And I think to say that, back up to what I was saying earlier about you got the big chunk of money, we could cover 10, 30%, right? Smaller municipalities, okay, Alberta pays 70%, the federal government pays 30%, okay. So that would probably be your small towns. But, man, I was driving through Forestburg in one of my videos. There's a lot of small towns heading out to Hardisty and all over the place in Alberta that do not have police stations. When I was in Hardisty, I was running a polling, or not a polling, helping some people collect signatures, and I saw one police officer drive by on the road, on the highway. So obviously they just do highway patrol, but that was 3 hours and they drove by. So it's you call 911 out in these small towns, you don't get a police officer for hours and hours. So I don't know if that's ever going to change, but yeah. How would you, you'd have to spend a lot more money to change that. Federal policing. RCMP also provide federal police services, national security, organized crime, fully funded by the federal government, including its $3.7 billion national RCMP budget. You know, I'm going to say something really controversial here, but the drugs are coming in, right? The crime is still happening. And I was wondering, how is it that this is going on? It's got to be because of corrupt people in the government. At this point, like okay, you're telling me that all those drugs are coming in, just somebody's smuggling it across on a backpack or something. No, there's a semi-truckload coming through, and there's corrupt people in the government and in the police who know to look for that vehicle, and then they just don't stop it. And then they hear that it's the RCMP that are running the national security, right, for organized crime and all that. And then you hear about all that stuff in Ottawa or Ontario. What was that about? Leave a comment below. My memory's kind of failing me, but there was a whole bunch of corrupt police officers. They were doing something, and well, my memory's slipping me here, guys. But leave a comment below. I think provincial police force would still be open to corruption like that, but when it's smaller, it's easier to manage. Do you know what I mean? Like, we'd be able to pick up on it quicker, and the people who are accountable, they're like right there. Like, you could just, like, I'm going to drive to Edmonton, or I'm going to drive to Calgary, and I'm going to find where this is, and you can see it. And so I think as a general principle, when things like policing or any kind of government thing is closer to you, you have more control over it. And I have a hunch that would solve a lot of this problems, right? But yeah, the RCMP are currently running all the they're running the organized crime. Now, if you're in the police, you might be offended by what I just said there, but please give me an alternate option here. How is it that all these drugs are coming in? Is it just because, like, they're just really super sneaky? They got tunnels? Maybe they got tunnels. They probably do too. Alberta's RCMP costs. Total policing costs. In 2021, Alberta's total policing costs were approximately $595 million. Okay, broken down as provincial cost, $358 million. Municipal, $196 million. Sheriff, $41 million. Federal contribution, $188 million. Okay. Recent increases, RCMP collective agreements increased by 39% in smaller communities, with Alberta covering some increases temporarily. So I guess the police negotiated themselves a better deal with their unions. Provincial estimates. A 2021 PricewaterhouseCoopers report estimates Alberta's RCMP costs at about $500 million annually, provincial and municipal share, with the federal government contributing $170 to $188 million annually. Okay. So, like, what this is saying is the province is already paying well over half. And so we would have to presumably cover the rest of this just to have the same level of service. So it's there. They're just laying it out. You can see it. Nobody's hiding this. We know about the risks. Nobody's saying we don't have these risks. Are federal fees included in tax contributions? The taxes are premiums paid by Albertans to the federal government funds federal services. The taxes and premiums paid by Albertans to the federal government funds federal services. Okay, including RCMP's federal policing activities, national security. However, the specific fees Alberta pays for RCMP contract policing are not directly included in these contributions, as they are separate payments under the PPSA-MPSA, billed to the province and municipalities. So, in the second video that I made in this series, it laid out the different, like how much money we pay in, how much we get back. And I think what this is saying is a large chunk of this is not included in that. So this isn't money that we pay to the government and the federal government and then they give back to us. This is money that we pay directly to the police. Contract policing fees. Alberta's $554 million, $358 million provincial, plus $196 million municipal for RCMP services is separate from the 68 to 75 billion federal tax contributions, as these are direct payments. Okay, I got to start jumping ahead in my mind because they're answering the question like right before I read it. Federal contribution. The $170 to $188 million federal subsidy is funded from federal budgets, indirectly supported by Alberta's $68 to $75 billion taxes. Okay, so implications for an independent Alberta. In the context of an independent Alberta, as discussed previously, current RCMP costs: Alberta, $554 million, $358 million provincial, $196 municipal. For contract policing is separate from the $68 to $75 billion tax contributions. The federal contribution, $170 to $188 million, will be paid out of recovered federal tax revenues. So it's saying that the money that we don't have to pay to Ottawa, we could use to pay to cover this cost. So we are able to, like, just day one, nothing really is going to change then in this regard, because we stop paying Ottawa and then we just continue paying the bill that we had before for the police. Okay. Not requiring Alberta to cover the full cost. Good. Estimated costs for replacement. Our estimate suggests $0.7 to $0.7 billion annually to replace RCMP services, provincial and federal policing, with $0.1 to $0.2 billion in setup costs. Again, I wonder how they figured these out, right? Because, like, why does it cost so much to switch over? I'm thinking, like, I guess you got to buy them new uniforms. You got to you got to repaint the side of the vehicles and put a new sign up on the buildings. But, like, they already have the buildings. They already have the cars. They already have the guns. Like, there's a lot of billions. Why is it costing that much? This is a question I keep asking, and it's not explaining that in this document. Where was I here? Okay, so provincial policing. A 2021 report estimated a provincial police force would cost $734 to $759 million annually, plus $366 million in startup costs compared to the current $500 to $595 million for RCMP. So this has already been costed out, and there's been a lot of push in the last 10 years, 15 years. It's been talk about getting our own police force, and we're pretty confident in our estimates here. Is basically what this is saying. Whoops. Pension support for RCMP personnel who transferred to an Alberta police services is a highly desirable policy, supportable with this financial framework. Good. Like, everybody agrees with that. Everybody in this movement. We don't want to leave any police officers behind. If you're a police officer and you're thinking, hey, maybe I want to vote for independence, like, just rest assured that we're not going to screw you out of your pension and be like, hey, now you got to work for us and you're going to get paid less. Like, come on. That's not going to happen. Okay? Federal services with RCMP clarification. Table 2, page 7 shows RCMP policing costs and confirming that contract policing fees are not included in the $68 to $75 billion tax contributions, specifically considering not included in tax contributions. The $554 million Alberta pays for RCMP contract policing, provincial and municipal shares, is separate from the $68 to $75 billion in tax contributions. These are direct payments under PPSA and MPSA agreements, not federal taxes. Good. Federal contributions. The $170 to $188 million share federal subsidy, federal subsidy, 30% provincial, 10% municipal, is funded from federal budgets, which Alberta's taxes indirectly support. Okay, so like the argument here is we're already paying our taxes to Ottawa, and then they're paying it back to us. And so if we take control over this, like, it's gonna balance out. We're not gonna all of a sudden have to like keep paying Ottawa and then pay for our own ourselves. You know, that's literally how this is gonna work. Okay, so independence impact. An independent Alberta would need to fund the full $734 to $759 million for a provincial police force, replacing both contract and federal policing. An increase of $164 to $259 million over current costs, plus $366 million in setup costs. Other benefits of an independent Alberta police force include enhancement of rural and urban policing, brought about by a police force which is accountable to Alberta and its people, far more directly than having accountability to distant Ottawa. And I like that they end off on that, because it's one thing to look at the costs. You know, you think a police officer is a police officer is a police officer. But then it's another thing to look at the value of having control over our own police force here in Alberta that is designed to meet our needs. That's representing our values. You know, you look at some of the police forces in Ontario, and it's like, do I really want to go into this in this video? You know, I'm not. I'm just thinking about something that happened in the trucker convoy, right? But I'm not going to go into that. Anyway, guys, please leave a comment below. Please leave a whole bunch of comments. I want to continue this debate with you, and I want to see lots of people debating below. If you're a police officer, let me know what you think. Tell me if you're concerned that you think Alberta would screw you out of your pension, or if you think that, hey, this is actually going to be a better deal for everybody. Tell me about my comment with regards to how the drugs get into Canada, because that to me is really something that kind of weighs heavy on me. Like, how is this happening? You know, and is it really a solution to just say, let's just spend a couple more $1 billion on policing? Like, my idea is to have a police force for the police force, where their only mandate is to like sneak up on cops and make sure that they're doing their job properly. And I hate to say that, because like if you're a cop, you might think, oh, I don't want that to happen. But like, your job is to do that to us. You know, I'm playing on my phone, rolling through a stop sign. You're supposed to be hiding around a corner, making sure that like you're going to catch me. Well, who catches you? You know? And I feel like whenever I hear stories of police corruption, and I hear stories of like all these drugs that are coming in, and all the international crime and the extortion and the money laundering, like, you know what's happening. And then every now and then they have a big drug bust. But it's like, it's got to be an inside job a lot of the time. Like, how can it not be? And so maybe I'm just imagining things. Tell me that I'm wrong, that this isn't all an inside job, and that our police are just 100% like honest, you know, law-abiding. But I think it would be good for us to have a police force for the police force. Maybe they wear normal clothes, and they can sneak up on police officers and make sure you're doing your job. They can look over your shoulder when you're doing your paperwork. They can access your communications. They can look through all your documents on your computer. They can see who you're looking at. Why were you looking at this license plate? You know, they weren't speeding, like, you know, and then just start holding the police to be accountable. Because look, a lot of professions have stuff like this, right? Oversight. And I just don't feel confident in the RCMP at this point. You know, now I do want to say the thing about the trucker convoy. The thing that, in my mind, when Canada died, is there's an image of an Indigenous woman getting trampled in front of Parliament by police on horses. And like, if you need anything symbolic to just think Canada's over, it's when the Royal Canadian Mounted Police do that to an Indigenous woman in front of Parliament. And now I guess you could say, oh, the situation was she was supposed to disperse and all that. It's like, yeah, you know what? They could have got off their damn horse and they could have helped her. Or they could have just let us have her, because whole thing was deemed to be illegal anyway. Anyway, guys, I'm ranting. You should have probably already left this video a long time ago. Okay, please like, comment, and subscribe. Cheers.